I'm going to carry on where I left off. Think differently. Like we've spoken about AI, about regeneration and it having this rebirth, like bridge designs. How can we think differently within our industry to move it forward and to solve the many problems that the industry has going forward? How do we fix them?
Necessity, the mother of all invention. Something that's been there all along, that someone's just taken a really sort of clever little bit of lateral thinking or has looked at something a little bit differently, and it unlocks potentially this massive change. Those people that just have that little bit of something to be able to connect a couple of threads together or to look at something slightly differently and offer a solution. We don't shout about it enough, but there are some really, really brilliant people working in this sector.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Adobe Acrobat.
Right, Ryan, we're back for another short 4-day week. Five working days for us into 4. How do you manage it?
Just don't sleep. Don't sleep. No, it's good. I keep saying this. They're nice problems to have. I think if we were sat around sort of scratching for stuff to do, then we'd be panicking, wouldn't we? So it's no bad thing, is it? And after 3 days with the kids, I'm delighted to be back at work. So yeah, no complaints from me, mate. I'll take it. How's your weekend?
Well, well, to be honest, if we're scratching around for things to do, we might as well start a podcast, eh?
This is true.
It seems to be the thing to do. Why not?
No, there's enough of those. There's enough of those now. I wouldn't bother.
No one needs another. No one needs another. No, don't bother. Really, don't leave it to the expert. No, leave it to just people bumbling around talking about construction and horticultural ongoings. Didn't make a tip run, but I did cut the grass, so I'm on for a win. Actually, ironically, or even not ironically, the way that came about was my kids were playing outside, and I walked outside to try and get them inside, and all of a sudden the sun came out, and I thought,
meant to happen. Mine was really chilled out, which was needed because again, I think people are aware that the way that we kind of work this show is off the back of my LinkedIn roundup on a Friday. We kind of select stories from there typically, and those form, or 3 of those at least, form our headlines. But some weeks are easier than others, and last week was not an easy week to try and find some positive headlines. So many of the we foreshadowed them a little bit, didn't we? But so many of the industry sort of updates with all the baked-in numbers now from the Middle East conflict and the Strait of Hormuz closure and so on. Not making for fun readings, mate. So, but I should say, with some more than enough help from yourself, we found 3 that I'm really excited about. There's some really, really fascinating stuff. But yeah, again, as I said last week, there won't be any of my usual economic updates or policy updates or any of that sort of stuff, just because, boy, do they not make for fun reading at the minute. And we are trying our best to focus on the positives. And I think we've just about done it, Pete.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the Ryan Jones economic update express is delayed by 7 days, unfortunately. So just please bear with us on that one. But yeah, like you say, we've got 3 really, really interesting headlines, and we're going to start with one from building.co.uk. And apparently Regeneration is back, but under a very different model.
Yeah, which shouldn't be that surprising for us. We've I think Canary Wharf, think there's several other sort of large scale developments, particularly the London ones, the Battersea and Olympia and so on. That I guess it shouldn't be all that surprising, but a fascinating report.
Yeah, and it is, and for those that don't know, this report comes from Regen Connect, which is set up for a year-long, call it editorial campaign. It's more like a digital hub led by building design and housing today, and it's to track regional regeneration across the whole of the UK. And the cool thing about this is that, like Ryan said there, we've been reporting on pockets of regen. A lot has been in the capital, but we've also seen different little chinks of regeneration up and down the country. And what Regen Connect is saying is that, and they've got an interactive map, by the way. I need to point that out first and foremost. Who doesn't love an interactive map? Like, absolutely sold, Regen. Well done. But what it's saying is that up and down the country, there are some really, really exciting regeneration projects. And there's a lot of money being pumped back into regeneration, and rightly so. And when it's done well, it's fantastic, absolutely brilliant, and it could do nothing but be a positive for our industry. And where I think a lot of money should go, we've got new housing stock, but there's so much old housing stock and buildings and commercial and all that kind of stuff that retrofitting and regeneration can really, really help. Plus, you get that Britishness as well in that regeneration if it maintains its its historic value in how it's regenerated. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's an interesting one because there's some historical context there as well, which I think we've discussed a couple of times. We definitely did in the context of Canary Wharf. This idea of urban regeneration, particularly, massively, massively popular in the 90s and the 2000s. Again, I've mentioned the big one in the UK, on our patch in the Northwest, things like Albert Dock at Liverpool as kind of we will invest money into regenerating this particular piece, and then there will be kind of I guess the economic version of that pebble being dropped into the water, and then the ripples start to spread out from there, was always the idea behind these things. Yeah, insanely popular, and then just it was a dirty word for a long time. I think it's kind of around the sort of 2010s. It's just completely fallen away. There was something I was listening to a little while back where I didn't realize this, but prior to a lot of the UK projects, Baltimore in Maryland in the States was kind of the blueprint for a lot of this stuff, where waterfronts that were formerly kind of industrial premises, that typical sort of like red brick warehouse, I guess, it being a port town, fallen into disrepair, parts of the city that were just kind of no-go areas. And developers then saw that as an opportunity, working with the city to regenerate. It was kind of used as a bit of a stick to beat up the idea of regeneration, because it was popular and all of these things are built, but then you gentrify an area, you push out everyone that was there in the first place. And ultimately, within a 20-year cycle, apparently in this particular waterfront development in Baltimore ended up falling back into the state of disrepair that it was in the first place, largely. So I think the pushback with regeneration as a concept has always been, who benefits from this ultimately? Is it just about, making a kind of viable investment for typically, funds to put money into from outside of the area? Or is it about community and placemaking and building something is genuinely of use to the people that might live there? And I think what's encouraging in this particular report, so to swing right way back around, is that community and placemaking seems to be kind of at the heart of a lot of this. Ironically, we've mentioned London several times and kind of key developments in previous episodes and in the context of this. But decentralization is mentioned a lot in the report. Again, we spoke in the context of new towns, the announcement a couple of weeks back in terms of their locations. These aren't kind of your Welwyn Garden cities or your Milton Keynes, or someone's identified a huge area, or we are going to drop this here. There will be parts of that within the new towns development, but of the patches that you and I are familiar with, a lot of these are urban regeneration. They're urban centres. People still want to live in the city and so on. So yeah, I think that the decentralization point seems to be made several times is a key point, along with, again, not to labour the point, but looking at some of the economic updates in market. This feels like one of the few pockets of the built environment world where there is actually some money to spend. I think it's 46 billion that Homes England have earmarked for regeneration funding. So yeah, if kind of private housing starts and private investment is stalling and people are taking a wait and see approach, then pardon the pun, but the smart money seems to be to take a look at how you might get involved in some of this stuff. Yeah, loads to dive into, people. Anything that you want to pick up on particularly?
Yeah, just to carry on from what you're saying, there is a long-term investment, and what Regen Connect have highlighted so far over the past 2 to 3 months, start of this year, is that absolutely it's all about decentralization and shifting the power, and we've spoken about this being a really positive thing, but with guardrails, as with everything, it needs your guardrails, but it's shifting to local authorities who should know better than having it as a centralized hub in terms of what is right for the region and what is right for their communities and what's right for their constituents, if you like.
Well, and just to add on that, Pete, I think, again, going back to if the heyday of regen is the 90s and early 2000s, there wasn't decentralization. Well, you didn't have your metro mayors and other people that had that kind of devolved power to make these sorts of decisions. So yeah, maybe that isn't just bluff and bluster within a trade piece. Maybe that is some meaningful meaningful change there.
Yeah, I think you're bang right. There are more people that can make those decisions and the right decisions over certain areas of the country. Uh, it's all about funding, and it needs the funding, and the overriding message I feel in this is that that they highlight 5 key areas, and it's decentralization, funding required, viability. So make
Mm.
sure, like you said, Baltimore, perfect example, make sure that it's not a 5-year project. It's not a 10, 15 or 20-year project. You're talking 50, 100 years, and make sure that these things are built to last, because the one thing that seems to be a disconnect is that you make them, you build them, and then you move on.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it needs this continual updates, if you like, to make sure that it is working. Long-term capital, again, it's focusing on the long term. And regional divergence, going back to looking at it in regions and what works for one. Yes, it can be a use case and that worked, but is it right for that particular area? And particularly if you think about uh, urban areas and more rural areas, you're gonna get it. You're gonna get regeneration mainly in centres and city
Mm.
centres and more urban environments. But that's not to say it couldn't work in rural communities that might have been slightly withdrawn and not had that investment in them, and it could be absolutely rife for regeneration. So there's like 5 key areas that they covered, which I think are all crucial. It's all about getting it right and
Mm.
supporting this regeneration initiatives and getting them right, rather than it is petitioning against things that aren't working, or trying to get funding for something.
Yeah.
It's in the right place to do that.
Yeah, completely agree. I think one of the big things that stood out for me, as much as when we were talking about this to death in some respects, Pete, but the provision of housing, crucially important, not just these large numbers that kind of lose context after a little while, but what it actually means to people and communities. The flip side of that is that you have to show that viability point. There has to be a kind of pound value in order for people to want to invest and to see it through. There was a pull quote used in there from I'll mispronounce surname, so please forgive me, but Alex Note, who's the chief exec of the Housing Forum, saying patient capital will always tell you that regen absolutely pays. I think to that point on, taking a long-term view on funding and return and recoup on that. And I think that's absolutely true. I was at an event a couple of months back now, I think it was in Feb, where Stuart Rogers from Muse was speaking there. And he was talking about exactly that this idea of placemaking, community building, and understanding that this isn't going to be a quick payback, that they're looking at kind of, if I'm not being too crude, slightly unfancied areas from an urban regen point, that other developers maybe it's not viable because the return won't be quick enough, and that doesn't suit them from a cash position point of view, or doesn't sit with kind of the rest of their portfolio. But that's where Muse seems to be doing really, really well, is kind of looking at an area that's not a city centre, isn't prime real estate, but has the chance to become a community that serves the people that need it. And it will pay back over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and so on. They had some really, really nice case studies of where they've done that previously and kind of where they are now. And it's almost, it's taking an investment in that area, seeing the potential in it that maybe others don't, and then taking a view. But I think the more that can be done to sort of pull at that particular thread and make the clear commercial case for this, I think that's where viability, it's where funding, it's where kind of everything comes from, isn't it? We all understand the innate importance of this stuff. It's how do you demonstrate that it pays in more ways than one?
Yeah, completely. So yeah, check it out if it's nothing else but for the interactive map and seeing what's going on in your region. I'll keep plugging in interactive map. Who doesn't love one? But yeah, doing some good reporting and good analysis on regeneration there. So I'm pretty sure we will circle back to this at some point in the future of 2026 and see how that's getting on, and some more positive vibes from that. But moving on, it's back to our old friend AI. Welcome. Yeah, and
at some point we can outsource all of this to AI, scripted by, delivered by, edited by, and we're away, aren't we?
On that point, we'll take a quick break here. I just want to pay some service to our partner, Adobe Acrobat. And the reason that I've paused it here and want to talk about them is because I don't think producing this podcast would be possible without Adobe Acrobat and specifically PDF Spaces. And if you haven't seen PDF Spaces, please go and check it out. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to upload web links, Word documents, just copy PDFs and put it into one space. And then you can actually talk to all your documents. And what it allows us to do, it allows us to create podcast show notes, LinkedIn posts. It allows us to break down all the specific bullet points so we know we're covering every single part of an article in detail and we're not missing anything. But it's not just that, but it's referenced and see which part of the document that is in. So you know that it is factually correct, and that's hugely important.
Exactly that. And the level of the time savings and productivity gains as a result of that mean that Pete's used the word us several times during that, and he actually means him, because Adobe Acrobat has made him so productive that he does all of that and all of the editing, and I just simply have to go out and find some stories and then turn up on a Tuesday and read them. So thank you again, Adobe Acrobat, for allowing me to contribute the bare minimum to this podcast.
Playing down your role there, Ryan, as ever, right?
Yeah.
Let's get back to it, shall we?
Adjudication, a really, really interesting piece on the idea of, again, we've spoken a lot, almost to the point where it's become an in-joke on the podcast about the use of AI in sector and different use cases. I think we've been thinking a lot about construction almost in a golden thread sort of typical sort of project planning way. Where do you drop it in within those things? That could be within design or build or decommissioning, whatever else the case may be. Obviously, you very kindly hosted a podcast with sorry, if you didn't host a podcast, you hosted a roundtable with Douglas, the Tilbury Douglas robot, a couple of weeks back. So that's now starting to happen as well.
It wasn't just me and him, by the way. There were other people in the room.
I didn't say romantic dinner. I said round table. But yeah, adjudication's not a topic that's come up. But this is it's a fascinating one, and I have to say before we dive into the story, it's one where I was roped in by the headline and then kind of had a read and thought, "Ooh, this is where I start to get a little bit uncomfortable with not quite rise of the machines, but in things where there's subtlety, there's nuance, there's kind of the need for human decision making within this." And yeah, I was placated a little bit, as we'll come on to within the story. But on the face of it, the idea that adjudication is just going to be handed over to AI for very, very quick decisions potentially was even if there are productivity gains and other things, it was something just given the nature of it that worried me a little bit. But should I have been worried, Pete?
I think with AI and any new technology, there needs to be this this hint of step by step, taking it slow, making sure it's done for the right reasons, not diving straight in, particularly with things like this that are massively, massively important and subjective. You're always going to get two sides to a story, and at the end of the day, one is looking to be right and one will be proved wrong by law, essentially. So yeah, an air of skepticism, rightly so, but I think looking forward, again, going back to the previous story, it's not 1, 2, 3, or 4 years. This is 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 years, 1,000 years, into the future. We need to make progress, and AI isn't going to go away. It isn't going anywhere. It's not like it's a fad. It's ingrained in, and it has been for many years. We just haven't been told about it, and it's ingrained in what we do as societies and humans.
Yeah.
This is coming more from the US, from what I gather, and I love an acronym. American Arbitration Association, the AAA, through its international division of the ICDR, have launched this AI-assisted arbiter, or the platform. But the real positive and the reason that I'm saying, you just calm down. Ryan, you're gonna be fine. The robots aren't taking you anywhere. Is that all this is AI led, but with human intervention. So it's AI doing the admin, and then a human looking through what it's produced for speed and going, yeah, that matches, that matches, that matches.
Yeah.
This is the decision. So AI isn't actually making the decisions; it's just providing the specifics and doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah. No, which is perfect. Again, if you, I've said it for a while now. That's how we should be using these things. Particularly, this feels like a case-specific large language model, which are very good at sifting through mounds of data and finding median points and finding patterns and so on. Still needs a human, as you say, at the end of it to interpret, to kind of take points. One of the things it's saying here, it will not only flag sort of, here is the policy, here's what's been submitted, and therefore, here's your winner. There'll be bits because humans aren't perfect. If you think of the kinds of things that a typical arbiter might be asked to rule on, it's delays, it's compensation claims, it's disruption, and all that kind of thing. It's not going to be a perfect world where everyone has everything documented, and therefore there is going to be some interpretation and some reading between the lines. So it's again, once you calm down, get behind the headline, and start to sort of unpack this, it makes absolute sense. You're absolutely right. Not only is AI not going anywhere, but keep harping on about it. If you look at what's happening in economy at the minute, we have to find a way to get things moving along and find some productivity gains and so on. So yes, I think this is a really smart use case. We're within the piece. So this was written by Richard Adams of RWK Goodman. As I say, this has been tried in the States. It looks to be very successful over there. And the UK system, apparently, it is an ideal fit for this. Very paper-based. Despite sort of new regulations coming in from government, they're tweaks and improvements to things that have been established for quite a while when it comes to case law. So, you've got mounds of data where you can train these models pretty quickly to be able to spot patterns and consistencies and so on. I didn't realize this, but for arbiters, there's an expectation of a 28-day turnaround on decisions having been made when someone has posted a claim in there. So, if you think standardization of data going in, that has to help massively. If all of the role of not all, that sounds really disparaging, but if the role of an arbiter is made much more streamlined in being given a pack effectively of, here is what I've observed and these are the things that I've seen. However, these are the things that you want to question, then 28 days suddenly looks a lot more, I would guess, a lot more achievable on that basis. So, I'm all for this. And again, acronyms, I absolutely love. The way that I read it when I looked at it written down, the American Arbitration Association sounded like someone falling down a well, which I thought was brilliant. The way that you've said it, big shout out to all of our listeners in Liverpool. It sounded like a Scouser, which again I absolutely loved. So this wins on the acronym front, and it wins on the sort of calming me down on my my inherent fears about some elements of AI. But really cool story, this one.
Yeah, and what it does go on to say is that there are challenges, particularly with confidentiality, the access to justice and legal compliance. But then you're talking about like I was saying previously, the guardrails that are put into this. And if you're, not that we'll go in any detail, but if you're training a model to do particular things, then you want this model to be closed, you want it to be secure, you want it to just be trained on particular information and nothing else. And I think these types of things where you've got it's either right or it's wrong. And don't get me wrong, I know there's a lot of grey in these areas, but at the end of the day, there's going to be one side wins in these things. I think using these things for AI for this type, even if it's infancy, can only be a good thing, particularly with the 28 days thing, like you said. And it's just the start, and that's what I want people to really take away from this story. It is just the start. It's not tried and tested. We're not in a position where AI is the thing that we can rely on wholeheartedly. It just isn't. We're just at the very, very tip of the AI iceberg, and these things, we still need to test them. We still need to try them, and you will get some weird answers from AI. You're just going to. But it always makes me laugh when you see, particularly on LinkedIn, you'll see somebody that says, "I asked AI if I should walk like a duck for the day, and it said yes." How silly is AI? And it's like, that's not the point. You're asking it the wrong questions. Or you tell, it's the way you phrase it and it's the prompting. It still needs humans in the middle of it. And this is wholeheartedly that. It's
Yeah.
using AI for the right reasons, but a human is holding its hand.
And I think you're bang right on all of that, Peter. There's two bits for me there. I think one, again, the more we talk about this idea of it's not AI doing the decision making,
Yeah.
it's taking large sums of data, sifting through it, finding a median point, and then passing that on to a human to apply some thinking and some sort of human touch to interpreting these things. I think back to the conversations that we've had a couple of times now about the building safety regulator and its innovation unit. And again, we've praised them a lot and they deserve it. But I do wonder again, is there a bit of a synergy here of, incredibly complex things that would tie an individual up for weeks and months, possibly to get to the bottom of them, to then make a decision that how many other parts within the sector could be simplified, at least in sort of the sort of formation of data, to then make the human decision-making element of it much, much more quick off the back of that. And where might we get to as a result of that is one part of my thinking and planning, for instance. The other thing that I've got in mind, because one of my concerns, I appreciate this is slightly off piece from construction, but we've spoken about AI as a means of decision-making in courts in general, particularly at lower levels where your jury trials are impractical and take up too much time and so on. And that's always made me a little bit, just because of the way our justice system is, it makes me a little bit nervous. But in cases like this, I do wonder, does this level the playing field slightly for the smaller players within the sector? For instance, if you have a micro business or SME that has umbrage and has a case potentially against one of the big sort of contracting players, for instance, but can't afford legal representation to the same extent, or isn't as averse with case law, doesn't have the internal resource behind it to help with the paperwork and everything else. Does this remove some of that, David and Goliath type thing? And I'm sure, again, I have no case to reference and apropos of nothing, but it seems fairly obvious that the side with the better counsel and the bigger resources is more likely than not to fare better against the smaller business. Part of me wonders, actually, does this tip the scales a little bit more, that you've got a completely independent piece of software that can do some of that sifting and decision making? And I don't know, you're almost judging blind in some respects. Just a thought, it hadn't hit me until we were talking, but maybe there's another upside to this beyond just pace of decision making and everything else.
Again, it's whatever you're telling it and whatever you're feeding it and what it's learning from. And like you said, if that is an even playing field, and it's not done on the back of prestige or size or scale or scope or any monetary value, then you are leveling it out in certain ways. Absolutely, yeah. So think on if you need any further advice from our counsel on AI assisted adjudications, feel free to reach out. We're available on Tuesdays and sometimes Fridays, and maybe not
Again,
the weekends.
I don't love the use of "we" in that sentence, Pete. I hope you mean you and your AI buddies on that one, because I am out.
We both know a few AI buddies we can lean on for these types of things. So by help and assistance and counsel, we actually do mean we'll go to somebody that's far more competent in AI than we are, and find the information that you so readily need.
Yeah, quite.
Let's move on.
Let's do it.
Let's move on, and let's move away from building.co.uk to new civil engineer. This is such a sideways move, this news story. It's just fantastic. So we're looking at a small pocket of our market here in bridges, and a new online marketplace has launched to facilitate steel reuse in bridge works called Rebridge. Now, this sounds just like it sounds like we're joking in a way, because it's such a specific niche in our marketplace: infrastructure, bridges, steel. You couldn't get more niche, but it's a really, really interesting headline, as they always are on this podcast. And this is basically a platform that's been created by a number of organizations to facilitate the redeployment of steel in bridges, which can only be a good thing for the environment and collaboration and the way we use products within construction, instead of them just being disused, disregarded, or recycled in terms of taken away and smelted down, or however you do these things with steel. It's actually using the components on different bridges, which is pretty cool. What's your take on this one?
I absolutely love it. And also, it was NCE that we'd seen it in, but it got picked up in quite a few different places. This one of them, again, just to give it a shout out to a different publication, just because I loved it. There was part of the, I've got it here, construction management. One of the subheads they had was nipping down to the second-hand bridge store, which I absolutely loved. Not that I'm in the market for a second-hand bridge, but I love it as a concept. It's I'm going to try and do this as respectfully as I possibly can, but there was a guidance note. Again, they serve different purposes, much more highfalutin for people in sector, but steel construction designed for reuse and adaptive reuse, which came from Steel for Life and the British Constructional Steelwork Association, which was, again, broader than bridges, but saying the same kinds of things. I think it's been very, very well documented in the last couple of years. Britain's last steel foundry almost having the lights go out last year, and what that might mean, not just for the community up in Scunthorpe, but for the UK as a whole, construction being a massive user of steel products. So there's that issue, plus the idea of circular economy, sustainability and everything else. So yeah, it's easy to be flippant about the second-hand bridge store, but I think it's such a cool idea. This idea of something that feels permanent, feels single use, feels that at the end of its life, it's just going to be deconstructed, destroyed, and moved on from. I think that someone has thought about this at that level, I think is a really, really cool thing. So this is basically, it's an online catalog ultimately for anyone that is an asset owner. And that could be highways agency, that could be a local authority, that could it could be private owner. In fact, if you've got a site that is needs to get over something beneath it, a highway or a rail line or whatever else the case may be. But yeah, if that's no longer in use for whatever reason, it could be that it's hit the end of its life. It could be that there is no need for that road to be accessed and so on. You've got a chance to relist that and have people effectively bid for the constituent parts of that as part of the deconstruction process. It's keeping steel spans and other elements in use for much longer. It's finding them a second life. It's, tick, 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 costs reduced, embodied carbon down. Again, third time in a row, third story now that I've mentioned economic volatility, but everything in market says that prices are only going in one direction. Steel, not cheap to produce anyway. There is so many. for what feels like quite a flippant, the whole nipping to the second-hand bridge store, it feels like a really flippant, throwaway, unrealistic thing. Again, the more you scratch the surface, the more it's like what a smart idea. Why didn't we think of this sooner? Which, as I said last week, I love these kinds of things. So, there's not a lot not to like with this one.
It for me, it just embodies the whole industry. A niche area, a real select area that you don't necessarily think about, particularly bridge components, and coming together as a collective on that to say, okay, how can we make this part of our industry better? And how can we think slightly differently about how we make bridges or dismantle bridges? And then coming up with this idea of just reusing things and why not? If you've driven up and down a motorway, you see bridges and most of them look the same. And don't get me wrong, I'm guessing that building a bridge of anything is hugely complex, massively. But the idea is kind of the same. So same with buildings, the idea is kind of the same. Watertight, it keeps people safe and warm and dry. So why not reuse these components? And there's a couple of sound bites that I think we can finish on here. And one of them's from Hazel Needham. And she says, Rebridge is about moving from theory to implementation. With the right tools and collaboration, existing spans can become valuable assets for new projects. Boom, straight away, like you could put that in any part of our industry. And the final quote, and I'm gonna do her name no justice here. So, like, seriously, apologies. Get ready for this. But format engineers, associate engineer Camille. I'm not even gonna say your surname. I apologize. I'm not even gonna try it. So we'll just call her Miss Camille. Says this catalog is the first step towards bridge stock led design, and it's this part that's great. The changing the question from what can we build to what do we have already. I think that's just that in itself is not what can we build, but what do we have already,
Yeah.
completely changes how we go about the built environment and what we do with it right from conception to finalization, which is just fantastic.
Yeah, completely agree with that. What a place to stop and jump into takeaways. Yeah. Where do you go from there, Pete? What's your takeaway this week?
I'm going to carry on where I left off and think differently. Like we've spoken about AI, about regeneration, and it having this rebirth, like bridge designs and rebridge. How can we think differently? Because we're going to have to. How can we think differently within our industry to move it forward and to solve the many problems that the industry has and continuously has going forward? How do we fix them? We need to think of it differently.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mel. Well, you've kind of taken what I was going to say there. I was going to say necessity, the mother of all invention. But I'm just going to say we have some smart people working in this sector, don't we? There are some very, very clever people that are able to
And there's us too.
And then there's us too. But yeah, it offsets us too, doesn't it? There are some clever people working in this sector. But like I said, I just, it's not loads of money thrown at a problem. It's not, it's just something that's been there all along, that someone's just taken a really sort of clever little bit of lateral thinking or has looked at something a little bit differently, and it unlocks potentially this massive change. I think with all, particularly the last two stories, but I think across the piece here, it's just those people that just have that little bit of something to be able to connect a couple of threads together, or to look at something slightly differently and offer a solution. I think there's we don't shout about it enough, but there are some really, really brilliant people working in this sector.
Yeah, I agree. And long may it continue, and they rise to the top and guide us all to the right decisions and in the right direction. And on that note, let's leave it there. Been an absolute pleasure, and speak to you next week.
See you next week. Bye bye.